it's Christy from Mentally Kills. I'm back with another interview. Today I have Shani-Lee and I'm going to bring her up to meet you guys. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming on. I do like to give the first couple minutes to let you tell everybody about yourself because I feel like kind of that's the best way for people to get to know you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I grew up in Newcastle, England, and when I was younger, I had a history of living with sexual abuse and high school bullying. And that actually triggered a lot of anxiety and depression. And because it went undiagnosed, first of all, because I didn't really want to tell anybody about anything that I was dealing with. I was keeping that inside and not really dealing with any of the emotions. So it manifested into an eating disorder. And so my childhood was kind of a bit crazy, you know. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And because I didn't talk to anybody and deal with anything that I should have been talking about, it kind of disrupted my mental patterns. Anything that I thought was normal was not normal. Anything that I was, trying to do to get through the day was not the right kind of thing. So as I was growing up, my anxiety got worse, my depression got worse, and ultimately my eating disorder got worse. But I mean, there's a light at that end of the tunnel because it all turned around, at some point. So yeah, that's my history. But right now, I am happily married. I've got two beautiful children, and my husband is so supportive with everything that I've been through, and he continues to be supportive with everything that I'm moving forward towards. So it's great.
It's beautiful. Does he have a brother? I'm just kidding.
He doesn't. You know what? A lot of my friends have asked that.
I'm just kidding. Of course, it's beautiful that you have a system and that despite, having I'm going to generalize it here, just self-esteem. When something like that happens and then you're bullied on top of it, it does affect anxiety wise, but also affects how you feel about yourself. And that
It
I
really
think is
does.
part of what triggers eating disorders because that is something
Hmm.
you can control. So that's what you
Exactly.
affect and you punish yourself that way because that's the only thing you can control. And
Yeah. And
that's a
everything else
terrible
was so
feeling,
out of control.
right? So what did you do when you had, those moments? Let's say, I know you said you got diagnosed with the eating disorder, right?
Yeah.
That was how old were you when that happened? In your teens?
Um, I no, I didn't get diagnosed until my mid-20s. So I tried
Oh
to hide
wow.
it. Well, actually, first of all, I actually when it first manifested, I acknowledged that it something wasn't right because
Mm,
I didn't understand what I was doing. I just knew that it wasn't normal. And I wasn't in the depth of it at that point. And because it wasn't triggered because weight related issues, it was triggered because of mental health. It was triggered because I was unstable and didn't know how to control everything, and it just happened. So when I sat down one day and thought about what I was really doing, I thought, this isn't right. I need to talk to somebody. So I actually went to the doctors about it. And because I hadn't lost enough weight, I was still in the normal range of the BMI. They turned me away and told me when I've lost another, I think it was another 10 pounds, then to go back. And
and that's like a challenge accepted. Why they would do that, I have no idea. It's like,
it,
hey, here's a challenge to dangle in front of you to lose more weight. Like
it's
that.
crazy. I left that office and I
Yeah.
thought, well, if the doctor's not worried about me, then I'm not worried. And even though I was a little bit bigger before I started losing the weight, so, but to them, they looked at me and I looked okay. Sure, I looked slim, but I didn't look like I was ill, which is crazy because a lot of people have this misconception, first of all, that either it's weight related if you have an eating disorder, or if you look healthy, you must be healthy. So yeah, so that was the
Yeah.
the crazy thing.
And that's and I'm sorry you went through that because there's nothing worse than having how you feel invalidated because then you start questioning yourself. And that's a horrible feeling. You were already
Exactly.
questioning what you were doing. Now you're questioning how you're feeling about what you're doing, which is
Yeah.
even worse when you have anxiety. So I can't
It,
imagine the struggle inside, like the internal struggle with it. You probably felt delusional, right? Like, am I
I did.
imagining that?
I honestly, a lot of times I felt like I was crazy, not only because of the emotions I was dealing with the abuse and the high school bullying, even though it was no longer happening in my mid-20s as well, I was still dealing with the aftermath of that, and I hadn't dealt with it and I hadn't talked about it. So I felt like I was crazy. I didn't know sometimes what was real, what wasn't, what emotions I was really feeling, or was I making things up? You know, it became a time where I couldn't trust myself. I couldn't trust my own emotions, my own feelings, my own judgment. And it was like we go back to the mid-20s is when I finally got diagnosed with an eating disorder, and I knew I had one, you know, it was getting pretty bad. I was blacking out. I was being hospitalized all of the time, and it wasn't a good road that I was on. But then my husband came in, and there was a point where my husband, honestly, he saved my life. There was a point where he sat down, and this sounds awful. He gave me an ultimatum, but it wasn't an ultimatum, you do this or this is going to happen. It was more of, I can't watch you die anymore. And you're not fighting to live. You're not implementing anything to get better or feel better, whether it's physically or emotionally. And I can't stand by and watch that. And he told me, I want to help you. I want to support you. Let me know what I can do, but I can't watch you do this anymore. And so that like ripped my heart, because
Yeah.
even though I was emotionally disconnected at that point in time, and my son, he was about 5, I felt like I didn't really care about what anybody else felt. It was all about me at that point. The eating disorder
Yeah.
and the anxiety and depression had just sucked me in so far that I didn't have any emotional stamina for anything else except for me and how I was feeling. But when my husband sat down in that moment and told me that, in the way he said it, he didn't say it with aggression. He didn't say it and make me feel bad about myself. There was empathy, there was love, there was, you know, I could feel the emotion coming from him. Like he was scared. He was really scared. And the fact that he asked me, what can I do to help you so that you can help yourself? That was the flip, the switch, sorry, that changed everything. Absolutely. So he was a main key in my recovery from eating disorders and in the support for the anxiety and depression as well.
It's so sweet. And I'm so upset he doesn't have a brother. Like, I'm still on that. You know? Kidding, of course, trying to
You
bring
might
light
have a
to
cousin.
All right. Well, listen, I'm single. No, I'm kidding. And crazy. No, I'm kidding. Um, I think that's beautiful that somebody kind of stepped in and said, "Hey, like this isn't a this or this, but this is what's going to happen because this is what you're doing." Because a lot of the time with mental health conditions, we don't realize how much we affect the people around us with our behaviors. Because, like you said, it's all about us,
Yeah.
but it's not. We're affecting the people around us like a ripple effect. So it's
Mm-hmm.
A+ work for him to step in and say, "Hey, this is affecting me, and I can't watch this anymore. I'm not going
Yeah.
to," because
Mm-hmm.
that's a heavy boundary setting, you know.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that with somebody that you really care for, because you do care for them and you want them to be happy, but that's not happy, you know. And it's getting them to
Exactly.
realize, like, yo, this isn't happy, okay.
Mm-hmm.
um
And I
so you
didn't
kind of
really realize, sorry,
no, no,
I
go.
didn't really realize how much it affected him. I knew throughout our relationship, it was becoming tumultuous. We would argue all the time. We would scream and shout, and it was, you know, it was awful. And I was very reactive as well. And over the years, because he didn't understand eating disorders, he didn't understand what it was that I was going through. He, you know, a lot of times he'd say things like, just eat, just do this, just do that, and
Yeah.
not understanding why I couldn't. And sometimes, for the most part, before I actually had that conversation with him, I didn't want to recover because that was scary to me. I didn't know
Yeah.
what the other side was. And even though It didn't start with weight related issues. It soon became about weight. Once I was in the depths of it, when I started losing the weight and people started giving me compliments, I would feed off that. As you mentioned earlier, my self-esteem was so low. I didn't feel anything about myself in a positive way. But when people were saying, "Hey, you're looking really good. What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh," I'd lie to them. "Oh, I'm training for a half marathon," or whatever it was, because I was a trainer back at that time. So that was realistic. And so I would feed off all of these positive comments because it was positive reinforcement, something that I needed to build my self-esteem, although it was based off false facts. But I say that kind of stuff because even though Paul didn't understand at one point, and he was a trigger for me, in that moment when he sat down and asked me, "What can I do?" One of the first things I said is, "You have to learn about eating disorders. You have to understand what it is that I'm going through. You have to understand why I can't stop and what you can do to help me by not triggering me. Change the way you word things so that you're not triggering me into doing the very thing you're trying to stop me from doing." And so at that point in time, he sat down and we come up with a recovery plan. So he's like, "Okay, I will learn, I will educate myself." And when he educated himself, more empathy came. He's like, "Now I understand. Now I understand that this is a symptom of something that happened a while ago." And then we talked about that. He always knew about my sexual abuse. He knew about my high school bullying, but he didn't know to what extent, and he didn't know how long. He didn't know the details. But in that moment, it allowed me, since he was showing me a different version of him, the more he was learning, the more he was understanding, the more empathy I was feeling, the more I opened up, the more I trusted him. The more I trusted him, the more I spoke about my trauma. And then I really feel, and I believe this, the more you talk about your trauma or talk about your fear, the less power it has over you. So the more I talked about it, the easier it became. And then once that foundation was built, I felt strong enough to move forward onto the next portion of my recovery. And it was in that moment in time, Paul implemented things like after eating, he would stay with me. He would keep me occupied to make sure that I wouldn't purge because I had bulimia. So I would binge and I would purge, and the binging is usually after an emotional time, or I'm feeling emotionally depleted, or anything negative that I was feeling, it would just get discharged with the eating disorder. And so he would put himself in that situation where he would talk to me. He would, ask me, what am I feeling in this moment? What's the worst that can happen if I don't purge? Things like that. And so him being there and showing me support without the judgment was a major player and a key role in my recovery. And then we just started implementing more things as far as the eating disorder went. Even the anxiety. So the anxiety and the eating disorder, I felt like the better I got with my emotional side, the more I was dealing with my demons, with my trauma, the less anxiety I got and the less my eating disorder behaviors manifested. So it's all connected. It really is all connected. And so we literally put a plan together, and I started meditating because I have to start my day off on the right path and just get that in that mindset. Even though it doesn't take all of the anxiety away, it calms me down. It lowers my blood pressure. It lowers my heart rate. So I'm better able to deal with what comes next. So I would meditate. I do affirmations. I am affirmations. And I would even say I am affirmations for things that I didn't quite believe yet, but I would do it in a what if scenario. So it's kind of like daydreaming. And when you daydream about something, it's okay that it hasn't happened yet, but you're daydreaming that it has. So it's kind of, the law of attraction. You put out what you want to come back. Yeah, I'm all into that. And so, things got a lot easier when I started implementing these things. And I do a daily routine, and I feel like if I miss anything in my daily routine, then my emotional state starts going down. It's like I'm an engine in a car, and if I don't fill it up, I'm not going to run as well. So the same as my emotional well-being, if I don't meditate, if I don't do affirmations, if I don't journal to keep my emotional state, stable, if I don't do all of these things, then it's easy to come back, and then the anxiety will increase because I'll start thinking about all this stuff that's running around in my head. And it's just too easy to do that. But as far as the anxiety goes as well, there were additional tips that or tools and techniques that I would use. I would, kind of, if I had a thought process of something that was making me feel anxious, I would acknowledge it. I would kind of waft it away in my mind, and I would transition that thought process into something different. So, for instance, I have performance anxiety as well as anxiety right now. So this morning I did my routine. I still felt a bit anxious. So in my thought process, I was thinking, okay, I'm so anxious. I'm going to do this interview. And, I acknowledge it. I wafted away and I turned it around and I said, you know what? I'm excited about this interview. I get to tell my story. People can learn from it. People can see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and that you can live a fulfilled and successful life, even though you have mental health. And I just feel like people need to understand that, because I feel like there's so many people out there that deal with anxiety and depression and other, mental health issues, no matter what it is. And they feel like they're in this little bubble and they can't get out of it, and they can't do anything on the outside of that bubble that they want to be successful with, whether it's, relationships, or whether it's in finance, or whether it's with work, whatever it is. I feel like I can't do that because I'm in this bubble. And they need to understand that they can. There's a way through. There's a way to live with it. There's a way to be successful, even though you're dealing with all of your emotions and all your trauma and all the therapies you have to deal with. There is a way through.
Very beautifully said. Very beautifully said. A couple things I want to touch on. Number one, you can find light at the end of the tunnel, and you might have a happily ever after, just like you, because he has a cousin, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it. I'm gonna keep going back to that because it makes you smile, but it's really powerful that he took the time to research. And what really strikes me about that is because I think more than anything, what we struggle with, this is my perspective, what we struggle with is having any mental health condition is no one understands us. No one could understand us because they don't suffer from what we suffer from. But that's not true. They can understand us. And there are people out here who want to, just like your husband. He went and did research. You guys implemented a plan together. He did research, but you two did it together so that he could understand you, to help you. How can I help you? That's the question that most people don't ask. How can I help you? If that,
and I think it's question, because people walk on eggshells, right? If somebody says, oh, I have this disorder or this disorder, it's like, okay, I'm not going to ask questions. It's okay to ask questions. I'm pretty open about all of my history, and talking about it makes me feel better. It makes me feel empowered. It makes me feel like, you know what? I've accomplished so much considering everything that I've been through. Absolutely. And I don't treat myself like poor me, the victim or anything like that. It's like, you know what? I experienced this. This is what happened because of the experience. I lived through it. I worked through it. And I'm on the other side. I don't have to let what I've been through and what I'm currently going through define me. I'm more than my trauma. I'm more than my mental health. I'm just more. I'm a better person than that. And so I just want other people to see that as well.
That's very true. Very true. So I do have one question to ask, and then I'll let you give, a word of wisdom, because I'll drop out for that. You give a little word of wisdom, and I'll end it from there. Because you kind of answered everything I had for you beautifully too.
Good.
Like right in a row. Because I'm listening. I'm like, all right, I'm going to ask, and then you're like, and then and I'm like, okay. And I love when that happens. I love it. Because you're so in tune with your story that you take us on a whole journey through it without me even having to ask you, and that's amazing. That's how worked through, let's say, how much work you've put into it and work you've put into yourself. to get to
Yeah.
this point, is what I'm trying to say. It kind of
Thank
came
you.
out like word vomit, but that was exactly what I was trying to say. So, one question I will ask is, in that period, kind of, before your husband was there and you had that support, and, you're still struggling with everything you were struggling with symptom wise, was there anything that you did to kind of help with that?
Before I met my husband, it was hard because I was trying to not let anybody know what I was going through. I didn't know what tools that were available to help my mental health. So before I met him, I really wasn't doing anything that was good for the anxiety or good for the eating disorder. I wish I
Beneficial.
did. I didn't have at that time. It wasn't until I was ready. I wasn't ready to recover or feel better
Yeah.
until we had that sit down conversation. It wasn't until that moment that I opened myself up and said, I'm ready for a better life. I can't live like this anymore. And now I have the support. The support is the key. The support is the foundation. If you don't have support, it's hard to build on that. So that's why I feel like he's such an integral part of my recovery in both anxiety and, the eating disorder and the depression, because I had no support until that time. And once I had that good, solid foundation, then I was able to build on that. But before then, I didn't implement anything. I didn't know what it was that I could do. The one time I probably would have when I went to the doctors was hoping to have, some insight of what to do, and they turned me away. So yeah, until that particular moment with my husband, I didn't implement anything. It was really hard.
Okay. So for
Except
the last,
journaling, if
journaling
that
is a
counts.
very good. Yeah, it does
Yeah.
count. It absolutely counts. Putting your thoughts on the paper is something.
Yeah.
And it helps you kind of organize it. Even if
Mhm.
it's not, even if you're not using it to move forward, you're still putting it down, and that's the first step. And that's
Yeah.
something. So, with that being said, I'm going to drop out. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to speak to anybody who might be watching, anybody who might be suffering from some of the things that you have, any kind of words of advice or wisdom you want to give them. And then I'll thank you and give my final word, and we'll be done.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I just want to let everybody know that you are not defined by anything that you've gone through. You are strong. You're courageous for anything that you're dealing with emotionally, physically. And I would definitely try and find that one person that you can trust, that one person that you feel like you can open up to and not be judged, and feel like they will listen, and talk to them about what you're going through, because talking about it will definitely take away its power. I've mentioned this before, but the more you talk about your fear, the less power it has over you. And once you start that process of talking about everything, it just lays a good foundation so that you can start building on that. So I just want to let you know that it can be done. People are doing it every day. People are scared. You will be scared. That is normal. But don't they say that discomfort means growth? So just keep thinking you're growing. With every time you feel uncomfortable with something that you're doing, you're growing, you're learning from it. And every step forward is going to take you to exactly where you want to be. So keep it up and keep smiling.
That was beautiful. Beautiful. Beautifully said. I loved it. I'm tearing a little bit.
Oh,
So, with that being said, thank you so much for your time and your vulnerability and telling us your powerful story. Because I know that it'll help a lot of people. And I can't thank you enough for being on my little episode here, my interview, and being part of my project. It does mean a lot to me. So,
oh, thank you. I appreciate being here and being able to help people and have people understand that you can push through it, you can work through it.
again. So, with that being said, I'm going to drop you out. I'm going to give my final word, and I'll end the broadcast, and I'll be right back with you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Mhm. So, powerful story here. Kind of feels a little bit like Disney. Am I wrong? Maybe I'm just a Disney girl at heart. it's beautiful to have that support system and somebody who genuinely wants to understand how you're feeling to help you feel better. But there is also support out there if you don't have it immediately right in front of you. Not everybody has a fairy tale ending. So that's why I created this page. We are your support now. We're here for you because you matter and you deserve a life that you feel fulfilled by and that you're happy with. So if you're struggling and you feel like you have nobody, guess what? You got me. You got Shani-Lee. We're here for you. With that being said, my name is Christy. This has been another Mentally Kills interview, and I'll see you on the next one.